And in Gershom Shalom, it said it the great sentence, and the fourth Mashiach accepting speed, later on between the great sentence and eventually the four and the Chili's and things stuff. As it was feeling like now, maybe it's not going to be a physical decided symptom yet. It's not the age. But if they could. It's not going to work anyhow.
I found another excuse. Good morning. They would have made better than Holocaust never would have happened, right? Good morning. Thank you for joining. We welcome back, everybody. Good to be back. Baruch Hashem. Torah never takes a break, especially now we're in a Gemara talking about how great it is to learn Torah. And the last two things we've learned was Torah is greater, learning Torah is greater than saving lives. If you were given the opportunity to be the prime minister of Iran, would you take it? No. But Mordechai had that opportunity. And the only reason he took that job, which the overwhelming consensus over here has been that nobody wants that job, was in order to save lives, to save Jewish lives, to be around in the royal court whenever there's an intrigue going on, whenever something is going on. He could be there to mitigate any dangers. But Mordechai, stayed around. His Torah learning, although he still learned Torah whenever he had the opportunity, he didn't have as much time to learn Torah as he had before. Several members of a Sanhedrin left, sort of separated themselves from Mordechai, but he still did it in order to be there for his brethren, to be there for the Jewish nation. So we see that it's greater to learn Torah than to put yourself in a position where you have to be saving lives. Obviously, if someone's life is in danger on the spot, then you leave what you're doing and go to save them. Or we're talking about being in a position, a politician, being somewhere where there's no active danger, but you're just there in order to be there to help save lives. The second thing we learned was how it's greater to learn Torah more than building the Beis HaMikdash, because Ezra, the great leader of the Jewish people right at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash, the head of Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, so Ezra, he did not go back to Eretz Yisrael to build the Beis HaMikdash. Rather, he stayed in Bavel and he learned Torah from Baruch ben Uriah. Baruch ben Uriah, he was the main Talmud, the main disciple of Yirmiyahu Hanavi, of Yeshaya, of Yirmiyahu. He wrote down many of the Nevuos. He wrote down the Megillah Eicha, the scroll of Eicha. And he was already very old when the second Beis HaMikdash was being built. He did not have the strength to go up, even on a wagon, to Eretz Yisrael, and therefore he stayed in Bavel. Another opinion is that he was in Mitzrayim, he was in Egypt, but either rate, he was not in Eretz Yisrael. And Ezra stayed and learned Torah by him. And only after he passed away did Ezra move to Eretz Yisrael, and that was in the 7th year of King Dariush's reign, and which is 1 year after the second Beis HaMikdash was completed.
Which part of the Megillah?
Tes Zayin Amud Beis, 16b, where the second to last line from the bottom of the page. So it'll be 16b4, perhaps. So Ezra did not go up to Eretz Yisrael to build the Beis HaMikdash because he was busy learning Torah by Baruch ben Uriah, a teacher which he could not have had anywhere else. A question is asked: from where do you see that learning Torah is greater than building the Beis HaMikdash? Maybe it's just equivalent. From where do you see learning Torah is greater than Kibbud of Vaeim, honoring your parents? Maybe it's just equivalent. We see in other places where we say two mitzvahs are equal. For example, Masechta Shabbos, it says, welcoming guests is just as great as getting up and going to learn in the house of study. So where do you see that it's greater to learn Torah than to build a Beis Hamikdash or to honor your parents? And so he answers, if Ezra would have moved to Eretz Yisrael, he would have fulfilled the mitzvah called Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, settling the land of Israel. Yaakov, he learned Torah, we're going to see soon in the Gemara. Gemara was going to make a lengthy calculation. For 14 years, he learned Torah in the Beis Medrash of Shem and Aver. Shem already passed away, so it's just Aver. Aver passed away 2 years after Yaakov left his yeshiva, which was outside of Eretz Yisrael. So from there we see that learning Torah is greater than them. Because although you have two mitzvahs, settling Eretz Yisrael and building the Beis Hamikdash, still it was more important to learn Torah outside of Israel. In general, whenever you have two mitzvahs that are equivalent, you do the one that has a maisa, has an action, is an active mitzvah as opposed to a passive mitzvah. Learning Torah, it's something that you do with your mouth, mainly speech, or with your mind. It's not considered to be an active mitzvah. Giving tzedakah or tefillin or lulav are considered to be active mitzvahs. So if learning Torah is not considered to be an active mitzvah, so if it would be equivalent to the mitzvah of honoring your parents, you should do the active mitzvah of honoring your parents. We see Yaakov learn Torah instead of honoring his parents. So we see that learning Torah is greater. So far, we see two mitzvahs in the Gemara, which are very great. One is building the Beis Hamikdash. One is saving a life. And still, learning Torah is greater and it's more important than these two.
But it occurred to me actually he was told to go away, but he was told to go away to get a wife. Here he was detouring to learn Torah for yeshiva.
So excellent point, Dovi. We're going to get to all those points that you brought up.
Indeed.
The third mitzvah, which is a very great mitzvah, is the mitzvah of Kibbud Vaeim, honoring your parents. It's one of the mitzvahs which were promised that you will have a long life if you honor your parents. And we're going to see how learning Torah is even greater than honoring your parents. And halacha, that's what's brought down as well. For example, if you have a Torah student, a Talmud, a student in a yeshiva, his parents want him to learn in one yeshiva, but he feels he's going to accomplish much more learning in a different yeshiva, he can listen to his parents. He doesn't have to listen to his parents. He could learn in the place where he thinks he'll learn better, he has a better rabbi, a better rav, even if he's unsure of it. Or for example, and this is happened many times, even in very recent history, if there's a city, a yeshiva, where people think it could be dangerous for whatever reason, it's an anti-Semitic place, or, in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel, right before the 6 Day War, we saw not too long ago, a video about how many yeshiva students during the 6 Day War, the Arabs were about to attack Israel, and it seemed from the natural way of things that it's going to be a big catastrophe in the land of Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, and all the American yeshiva boys were being told by their parents, go home. And they asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, you should stay in Israel. It's the safest place in the world. As we learned in this past week's Parsha, the eyes of Hashem are on the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So when it comes to honoring your parents, so they could have gone back to America and learned in yeshiva in America, but they wanted to learn yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. They felt it was a better yeshiva. And learning Torah overrides is more powerful than honoring your parents. As we're going to, and the source of that is going to be from our Gemara. But that's what's brought down halacha, that learning Torah overrides honoring parents. In a similar sense, the parents want the child to leave yeshiva and go get a job or go to college, and he wants to sit and learn Torah. It's a mitzvah to have kibbud of Vaeim, to honoring your parents. Learning Torah is even greater than honoring your parents.
The Rabbi Grossberg actually from the Kollel said that he was actually in yeshiva, that dilemma where his parents actually wanted him to go to college, and he still wanted to be in yeshiva. So he managed to be respectful, but at the same time say, no, I'm going to stay in yeshiva.
Where do you see that? It's a mitzvah to honor your parents. Where do we see learning Torah is greater? No, let's see our Gemara. Second to last line on the page, Tez Zayin Amud Beis, 16b. Omar Rabba, says Rabba. Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, says Rav Yitzchak in the name of Shmuel bar Marta. He's brought down several times in Shas, usually saying in Agadata. Gadol Talmud Torah Yoser Mikibud of Vaeim. Shalom Aleichem Rav Shmuel. Says learning Torah is greater than even the mitzvah of honoring your parents. Where do we see that from? Shekol oison shanim shahaya Yaakov Avinu beveis ever loy nenash. Yaakov Avinu, our father Yaakov, he was for 14 years learning in the yeshiva, and he was not punished. So, at what point was he learning in yeshiva? So Yaakov Avinu, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that Yaakov learned in yeshiva for 14 years. All it does say is that Yaakov loved to learn. He was ish tam, he was sincere. Yoshev Oyalim, he was a person who sat in the tents of study. He sat and learned Torah. But he went and he learned Torah for 14 years. After there was Yitzchak called his two sons, Yaakov and Esav, and he thought that the time for him to pass away was already coming near. And he called his two sons, he called his son Esav, he wanted to give him a blessing. Why did he not want to give Yaakov a blessing? He thought that his blessing could turn around his son Esav from his evil ways. And Yaakov, with trickery, with the help of his mother Rivka, went and he stole the brachas, he stole the blessings. Yitzchak, his father, was blind, and he came and to request the blessings from his father. And instead of Esav coming to receive the blessings, really was Yaakov, and he was wearing Esav's clothes. And Yaakov received the blessings from Yitzchak, his father. Chassidus explains why he had to receive the blessings in such a manner, in a way of a trick, in a swindling type of manner, because the blessings were so great they couldn't have come down in a direct manner. Esav finds out about it. Esav wants to kill Yaakov. Yaakov has to run away. Rivka's mother calls him in and tells him you have to run away. Then she calls him in to her husband Yitzchak, and Yitzchak and Esav both tell Yaakov to leave, go to the land of Haran, the land where Rivka was born, and find yourself a wife to marry, because you shouldn't marry a local Canaanite woman from Canaan. So rather go to Haran and find yourself a wife over there. So we have the end of Parshas Toldos, which says how Yitzchak sent away his son Yaakov. Let's go to just the very end of the parsha. The end of the parsha. It says Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram, to Rivka's brother Lavan, the son of Besuel, the brother of Rivka, who was the father of Yaakov and Esav. And that's so Yaakov is sent away. That's the end of Parshas Toldos. And then the next parsha Vayetze says, and Yaakov left Beersheva, he went to Haran, he came to the place, and he slept over there. And the Torah says nothing about, it sounds like it happened in one day. He left Rivka and Yitzchak in Beersheba, and on the way to Haran, he went and he came to the base. He came to the area of the Har Maria. He went back. He came to Beis Kel or Beth El. I think you're allowed to say the word. And he went and he davened there. Rashi over here says, and he came to the place, and he went and he davened over there. And he left and he laid down. Says Rashi, why did he lay down to sleep? He slept, he lay down in the place where he davened to Hashem. For 14 years, he was in the house of Aver. On the way after he left Yitzchak and Rivka's house, for 14 years, he was in the house of Aver. He did not sleep at night. He was busy learning Torah for 14 years, day and night. So he didn't sleep for 14 years. And then one night, he went and he slept in the place in Beis Kel. Haran Hariya joined him over there, and he slept in that place of the Beis HaMikdash.
We take that literally that he didn't sleep.
We take it literally, yeah.
Because they know if you don't sleep, you can die from it. He said he did not lie down at night. Didn't say he didn't lie down at daytime. Yeah, if you don't sleep for
3 days,
62 hours or something, you die. Yeah, somebody tried hallucinating, you die.
No, yeah, that was one of the things that Nazis would do to Jews, right? One of the things would keep them up for many, many days straight. I don't remember how many days it was, but till they would hallucinate, unfortunately.
Yeah. Seems like Chinese water torture something too.
I think it's sort of like, actually, it's like, we see if we know we're dreaming. Well, we don't know we're dreaming until we wake up. But I guess like maybe it's an in-between states where you're having dreaming and awake at the same time too.
So Yaakov was 14 years learning in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. Now, when Yaakov received the blessings from his father, he wasn't so young. He was already 63 years old. Because Yitzchak, the Torah says, was 60 years old when he gave birth to Yaakov and Esav, because he was 37 years old when the kid Yitzchak, by the offering, when he was brought on the brought as a carbon by his father Avram. Afterwards, for 3 years, it says Yitzchak learned Torah with the angels, with Malachim in Gan Eden. So he got married at age 40. Rivka was born right then, and he married Rivka at age 3. So we know from the age 37 to 40, where was Yitzchak? It says he was learning Torah with the Malachim, with the angels. At the age of 3, Yitzchak married Rivka, and for 20 years, they didn't have children.
Oh, there's a Rivka was 3. Then.
Rivka was 3, and Yitzchak was 40 when they got married. When Yitzchak turned 50 and Rivka was 13, they started expecting children, and they didn't have children for another 10 years, and then they both davened, and then they had children. They were answered by Hashem.
Number 60.
So Yitzchak was the age of 60, and that's what it says in Parshas Toldos. Right at the beginning of Parshas Toldos, it says, Yitzchak was 60 years old when he gave birth to Yaakov and Esav.
In those days, actually, if they were living so long, so I guess 60 was like, so it would be like 30 today.
Yeah.
Correct. I mean, it says Yitzchak ben Shushim Shana b'Leder Sosom. Yitzchak was 60 years old when Rivka gave birth to Yaakov and Esav. Now, the years are going to be very important, and the rest of this parak, rest of the chapter, is now going to be making the calculation. If a Torah never says how Yaakov learned Torah for 14 years in the yeshiva of Aver, after he ran away from his brother Esav, from where do we know that he actually learned Torah for 14 years? And the statement over here in the Gemara is that for all those years that Yaakov was in the house of Aver learning Torah in the yeshiva of Aver, he was not punished. Punished means like this. Yaakov's son, Yosef, was missing. Yaakov did not know where he was, and he had tremendous pain. And for 22 years, he was sad. And it says during those 22 years, the Shekhinah left him because he was sad. Now, for those 22 years that Yaakov was punished, you would say, why should a tzaddik suffer so much? And we say the Gemara will say, because 22 years that Yaakov went away from his parents. His parents were Yitzchak and Rivka. Yaakov went away for 22 years. And since he did not honor his parents for 22 years and had anguish from that, so therefore Yitzchak and Rivka, therefore Yaakov also in turn suffered for 22 years. He did not see his son Yosef, and he had a lot of anguish from that. The Gemara will soon point out and say it was more than 22 years. As a matter of fact, it was 36 years separation that Yaakov left his parents. Because we're going to make a calculation, and it comes out that there's 14 missing years from Yaakov's life, a whole of 14 years. Where was he? So we're going to say during those 14 years, Yaakov was sitting and learning Torah. So seemingly, if Yaakov was away from his parents for 36 years, it should have been commensurate, mida keneged mida, that Yosef should have been separated from Yaakov for 36 years. But it was only 22 years. And the Gemara says, from here we see, the fact that Yaakov learned Torah those 14 years was greater than honoring his parents, and therefore he was not punished for being away from his parents for those 14 years when he was sitting and learning Torah. That's what the Gemara says.
Meanwhile, he was preventing his parents from having the knack of hearing about grandchildren.
True. We'll get into all these points that Dovi is saying. The Marsha asks, you're asking the question of the Marsha, and he gives an interesting answer. The Chida gives another explanation on this. We'll get into that. So says the Gemara, Shekol osin shanim shayakov avinu beves ever loinenash. All the years that our father Yaakov spent learning Torah in the house of Ever and studied Torah there, who was not punished for having neglected to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring one's parents. So let's continue the Gemara. The Amar, now we're turning the page to 17a. And this is where Dovi is going to get his calculator out.
Okay. My phone's calculator.
You ready?
Yep.
The Amar, for we learned, our master has said. Now the question is, Yaakov was sent away by his parents. Why was he being punished for that? That was one of the questions that you asked. We'll get to that. Where our master has said, Lama nimnu shnoisav shel Yishmael. At the end of Parshas Chayesara, it tells you how long Yishmael lived. Now, in general, in the Torah, most people doesn't say how long they lived. It doesn't say how old Miriam was. It doesn't say how old any of the mothers were. Only certain people, it tells you how old they actually were. It tells you, okay, the first 10 generations, first 20 generations, 10 generations from Adam till Noach and Noach till Avram, it tells you how old they all were. But for many of the people, it doesn't say the Shvatim, the tribes, most of them, it doesn't say how old they were. It says Levi, but not Amram. So it doesn't say for most of the great people in the Torah how old they are. And for sure, for the Rishonim, for the evil ones, doesn't say how old they are. Doesn't say how old Haman was when he got killed. Doesn't say how old Tara was. But Yishmael, ve'ela shnei chayei Yishmael, and these are the years of Yishmael. This is how old he was. 137 years. And he died, and he was gathered to his people, and they made a big memorial for him.
Why did he say to his people? Been to his family was Abraham, right?
So to his people, because the only ones who missed him were his people. When Avram passed away and Yaakov passed away, many nations were missing him. But to him, the only ones who missed him were his people. So when Avram passed away, he was Av Haman Goyim, the father of many nations. When Yaakov passed away, the hunger stopped as long as Yaakov was alive. But once Yaakov died, the years of hunger came back. So he was missed by many nations. But to Yishmael, it says that the only ones who missed him, of his people, but nobody else was missing him.
His people being
His descendants.
That would also include all
Well, all right, Avram Avinu passed away already.
right. He would have been gathered up to him.
Right, so I hear the the chieftains of Yishmael are listed over here earlier. Who Yishmael's family were and where they lived. It says they lived from Chavila to Shor, and so it lists these are the sons of Yishmael. Nevayas, Keder, Adbel, Nipsa, Mishma, Duma, Masa, Chada, Tema, Yitor, Nafish, and Kedma. These were all of his sons, and these were the names of their villages and the fortresses, the 12 princes according to their tribes. So Yishmael had like a large presence. They went from Chavila to Shor, which is from Egypt, towards Ashur. So meaning he had a very large area as well. Al Panechal Echav Nafal, and he says he fell on the face of his brothers, and Rashi says over there, Nafal means he fell down, that a tzaddik, when he passes away, doesn't say Nafal, he fell, because they still have a life, their legacies continue. But once Yishmael died, he fell to Gehenna, and sorry. So Yishmael, he did do teshuva at the end of his life, but even his teshuva that he did at the end of his life wasn't, say, a tshuva me'ava, the highest type of tshuva. It says before he died, he did tshuva because he was scared when he might get punished when in the world to come. There's different levels of teshuva. There's teshuva where a person does teshuva in order to not get punished, or there's a level of tshuva where you want to get close to Hashem, and then there's tshuva me'ava, a high level of tshuva, where all of his past wrongdoings, all of his past averos could be turned into mitzvahs. That's the highest level of teshuva. So it says Yishmael, although he returned to Hashem, he did not do the highest form of tshuva. So therefore, even though he died, even though he did tshuva, when he died, it's not considered like he was a tzaddik. He didn't have, every day a person misses doing the mitzvah, according to the Zohar, it's like he lost an opportunity. It says, if one is missing one day of their life, a day wasted, they're missing a garment, they're missing the clothes. Imagine walking out on the street and you're just missing wearing your shirt, but you have everything else on. Right? So you're missing a garment, but missing one day of your life. And although Yishmael did teshuvah, but it wasn't affect his past to that extent. So the Gemara wants to know, why is the Torah telling us how long Yishmael lived? We don't see it even by most tzaddikim, except for Levi, Kahas, and Amram, but that's for a different reason to tell us about Moshe Rabbeinu. But how come the Torah tells us how long Yishmael lived? And even this, that it says Yishmael did teshuvah, it's not according to all opinions. Some opinions say that he did not do teshuvah at the end of his life. So says the Gemara, the only reason why the Torah lists you how long Yishmael lived was only in order to tell you about this gap in Yaakov Avinu's life. Now, before we get into this, we just need to keep in mind two dates that the Torah does tell us about Yaakov Avinu. It says when Yaakov went and he saw Paro for the first time, it says Paro met Yaakov. Let's go to Parshas Vayigash. Yaakov asks him, Kama yemei shnei chayav. How old are you? How old are you, Yaakov? Next one. Because Yaakov looked very old. Because he just suffered for so many years, missing his son Yosef. And in general, he had a hard life running away from Esav and from Lavan, and being so many years watching the sheep. He wasn't someone who obviously slept too much. So Yaakov finally comes to Mitzrayim. He meets his son Yosef after 22 years. And Yosef brought his father Yaakov. He stood him in front of Parai. Yaakov greeted Parai. Parai said to Yaakov, how many are the years of your life? How old are you? Yaakov said to Parai, the years of my life, of my sojourn, are 130 years. I'm 130 years old. So we know when Yaakov stands in front of Paro, he's 130 years old. So that's the only real date we have, knowing how old Yaakov is. So we have to sort of work our way backwards from there, based on clues and other hints throughout the Torah and throughout Chumash Bereshis, to figure out that there is a 14-year gap in Yaakov's resume. Imagine someone's applying to a job and just has a 14-year gap. Where were you? And in order to from there we could construe that Yaakov was learning Torah for 14 years, and from there we see that those 14 years he was not punished, and from there we see that it's learning Torah is greater than Kibbud of Vaeim, honoring your mother and father.
How do we know that he was learning Torah? I'm proposing that he was doing Averas for 14 years and they were going to put it in.
Saying, so from where do we see he was sitting and learning Torah? Good question. That's a very good question. The question is, Reb Shmuel. The way to construe it is from the word vayetze, and he left. Where did he leave from? Yatsa from what? And he left. Did he leave from what type of situation was he in? So that they have, I think, more of a tradition of vayetze mi-beis Ever. He left the house of yeshiva. It's like sort of he left yeshiva, he left study in order to do this. I think that's where it mainly comes from. But it's a good question.
Is there another place in the Torah where they use that word in the same context and they take it from one to the other?
It says, and Moshe left, Vayetze Moshe likras chosnei, to greet his father-in-law. Right? In a similar sense, he left. But in a similar sense, he was saying, judging the Jews, and he left. When he left, it says, entire nation came with him. Right? When he left, Moshe's going, Aaron went, his sons went. Aaron and his sons went, the elders went. The elders are going, all the people saw it, and they came to greet him. And then Yisro had a welcoming committee of about 3 million people coming to greet him.
We're right, son.
Okay, we'll continue now with Kunter Shumayin, especially that we're almost we're in the month of Elul, close to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and these last few mamarim in Kunter Shumayin are discussing all about what happens on Rosh Hashanah, what happens on Yom Kippur. So we're going to continue now with Kunter Shumayin. We're holding Maimer Chavdalid, Maimer 24. Do you want an English one or a book? Page 337. We can't just show up to Rosh Hashanah and say, Hashem, we're here, give us a good year, without having made some preparation, at least served Hashem before. You know, the famous line, why is it called the high holidays? Because you get to say hi to everybody you haven't seen the whole year. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is a build-up, it's a culmination, you could say, of the month of Elul before and of doing Teshuvah. The month of Elul, we're going to learn today about what happens in the month of Elul. V'hinei, Orach Chesed V'Chayis, Vashba sheniksevoy l'adam Rosh Hashanah b'chol minei toiv. On Rosh Hashanah, it's decided for the person that they're going to get many different types of good things. Whether it's in children, or blessings of health, blessings of prosperity, and which all come from Hashem. Their level of atik, the higher level of keser, which brings down the energy in the inner essence of the infinite light of Hashem, this comes down. When a Jew learns Torah, when a Jew does a mitzvah, this energy and power that it makes a reaction, a chain reaction in all the worlds, all the way up to the highest world of Atzilus. So when a Jew does a mitzvah or learns Torah, it brings down light of Hashem from the world of Atzilus. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is decided based on a Jew's actions of the previous year. What light of Hashem and energy from Hashem and from the essence of Hashem, infinite light of Hashem, from the world of Atik, from the level of Atik rather, should come down to the world of Atzilus. So Rosh Hashanah is decided how much comes to the world of Atzilus, and throughout the year it's decided what comes from Atzilus onwards. V'hinei ha'or v'ashefa sheniksev lo la'adam Rosh Hashanah v'nechtam b'yom Kippurim v'lefi avaydasai b'Torah u'mitzvos b'shana she'avra. According to the way a person acted, the Torah he learned, and the mitzvahs he did over the past year, that's how much energy and light will flow down to the person and be sealed, written in Rosh Hashanah and sealed in Yom Kippur for the person to receive. Like we say, we say this in Tehillim, we say this in Shabbos on every Thursday. Kapitel Pei Aleph, chapter 81 of Tehillim, that there is a decree for Tiko B'Chodesh on Rosh Chodesh, you blow a shofar, on Rosh Hashanah you blow a shofar. When things are hidden, which is on Rosh Hashanah, when the light of Hashem is still hidden, it only comes revealed Yom Chagenu on Sukkot. On Rosh Hashanah, it's a chok. Chok is a law. I mean, it is a set amount set aside for the person on Rosh Hashanah. The word chok means law. It also means your portion. It says, there were certain people who used to eat by his table, and they received sort of like a stipend from David HaMelech. They received a set amount. So there's a set amount for a person which is decided and judged on Rosh Hashanah. And they judge on what did a person do the past year. How did he serve Hashem in the past year? And that's how they decide how the person will receive on Rosh Hashanah what they could receive for the next year. So it depends on what the person did in the year before. What happens if the whole year the person didn't do anything or didn't live up to their expectations, only did enough to receive a little bit? It's not too late. There still is the month of Elul, and the month of Elul they could do Teshuvah. And it's not hard to do Teshuvah in the month of Elul. In the month of Elul, Hashem makes it very easy to do Teshuvah. And he makes people already aroused and makes them already warmer in the month of Elul. Third paragraph. It also, another factor determining how judgment of every person goes on Rosh Hashanah is how a person, the manner one does teshuvah in the month of Elul. The month of Elul, which we're currently in, which is a month of mercy. During the month of Elul, the 13 attributes of mercy are shining. So Moshe Rabbeinu, he went up to the mountain to Hashem 3 times. First time was on the day after Shavuos to receive the Torah. Came back down on the 16th of Tammuz, or rather 17th of Tammuz, he came down. 16th of Tammuz, the Jews made the golden calf. 17th of Tammuz, Moshe Rabbeinu came down. He saw the golden calf, and he broke the luchos, he broke the tablets. He went back up to the mountain the 18th of Tammuz, and was there for 40 days begging Hashem to forgive the Jews. And Hashem did not forgive the Jews. And he came back down the mountain on the 29th of the month of Av. And he went back up the mountain again on Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of Elul. And this time he begged Hashem for 40 days and nights to forgive the Jews, and Hashem forgave them. Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, Hashem, teach me please, what is the trick in the future? If the Jews ever sin against you, how could they get you to forgive them? What could they do? So Hashem told them the secret passcode, the secret passwords, which are the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim, the 13 attributes of mercy, which never will be empty, never be returned empty. And we say these in front of Hashem, and Hashem brings Rachamim, mercy on the Jews. So these were said to Moshe Rabbeinu, these were taught to Moshe during the month of Elul. And the month of Elul is a month of Teshuvah. It's the days when Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain, and this time Hashem forgave them. It says, and the first time Moshe Rabbeinu was on the mountain, the Jews were tzaddikim, all holy, righteous. He just received the Torah from Hashem. The second time they were Rishoyim, they were evil because they just sinned with the golden calf. And the third time they were Balei Tshuva, which is even greater than tzaddikim. They returned and did Teshuvah to Hashem. So therefore, the days of Elul are days of Teshuvah. These are days when the 13 attributes of mercy are shining forth, are shining, and will never be returned empty-handed. There were 13 times, 13 brisim, 13 covenants Hashem made with Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. Says so. All in the month of Elul, Huzman Esratzen, it is an auspicious time. V'napol Yosher Inyan Tshuva, an idea of Teshuvah is Tshuva can be much easier accomplished in the month of Elul. And the way it's explained, it's Kirov Hamar Elanitzutz. If you ever have, let's say, a small candle and a very large candle next to it, next time try it with, let's say, take a Havdalah candle and a small little match, the small flame will always go towards the big flame. But that's only if they're close to each other. If they're far apart from each other, it's not going to help. One's not going to go next to the other. In the month of Elul, it says, the great light comes to the nitzvahs, comes to the spark. Hashem, kindness, or Hashem is down here in this world, and our neshamas, the part of our soul, which is with us in our bodies, feels already a drawing and a cleaving to come close to Hashem. And it's much easier to awaken people to teshuvah, to do teshuvah in the month of Elul than it is throughout the year. So the days of Elul is days of mercy. And then comes the end of the month of Elul. At the end of the month of Elul, we say slichas, although the Sfardim say slichas already the entire month. They already get up early in the morning, the entire month of Elul. In the end of the month of Elul, the deeper you go into the month, closer to the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, so then it becomes even more auspicious than before. And it's a time of acceptance by Hashem. And the Rebbe says multiple times, quoting from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that from Chai Elul, the 18th of Elul, which is then 12 more days left until the end of the month of Elul, every single day corresponds to 1 day of the previous, 1 month of the previous year. So the month, so the 18th of Elul corresponds to the month of Tishrei, and so on. 19th of Elul to the month of Cheshvan, and one could do teshuvah for everything they missed out in that month of the previous year. So the end of the month of Elul and the days of Selichus are a time of acceptance even more than the rest of Elul. As the Alter Rebbe who quotes the Baal Shem Tov would say, to be made Elul in the month of Elul, 13 attributes of mercy are shining in order to arouse in the person that they should make a cheshbon, a self calculation, and the person should calculate in themselves and to judge themselves and to make a reckoning about how their past year went. And that's what we do in the month of Elul. Just like once a year, we have an accountants go make a reckoning of everything that happened the entire year. So too, the month of Elul is we are our own accountants to make a reckoning of how we acted throughout the past year. And this is the famous mimer of the Alter Rebbe of Ani Ladoidi V'Doidi Li, famous mashal he brings of a Melech Basada, the king in the field. How the king comes out to the people in the field, and therefore Hashem comes out to the people in this world. And here he's going to give, the Rebbe Rashab will give a different mashal, a different example of what it means in the month of Elul. And specifically during the time of Slichus, what it is. And I actually brought this down this morning in the early morning share. If somebody owns a store, say you own a store, and every single day there's a lady who walks into the store and she buys something, she buys whatever she needs. It's a grocery store, she's buying what she needs for her family. And every single day she says, no, put it on the bill, put it on the bill. She doesn't pay you for it. But at the end of the month, her husband comes and says, how much is the bill? And the husband pays up the whole thing. And that's how it goes. So therefore, the store owner at this point already has a type of relationship with the customer, with this woman, that every day he'll give her whatever she needs on credit because her husband will pay up at the end of the month. Then what happens one month when the husband doesn't come in and doesn't pay the bill? So the store owner thinks, okay, this is just a one-off, one-time thing. Sure, I'll come by next month. And next month, it must be a one-off. But eventually there comes a point where he stops extending credits. And one day the woman comes into the store and says, he wants to buy her stuff. He says, I'm sorry, you have to pay before. She says, but you never asked me for money. He says, yeah, because I expected you to pay. So she tells her husband, and her husband comes, and let's say she owes 3 months worth on credit. So then the husband comes and he says, here, I'm going to pay you 2 months worth right now, and I'll pay you the rest later. The next morning, the woman comes into the store. The store owner, she wants to buy her things. Again, the store owner lets her put it on credits. Why? Because knowing that her husband already paid up 2 months, and knowing that in the past he always paid, so he now extends credit again and says, okay, fine, I see you're already making a goodwill effort to pay, so now I could assume that you're going to pay entirely. So this is sort of the month of Elul. It's in a very similar sense. Even if one throughout the year wasn't being in the ideal way they're supposed to act throughout the year. But now it comes a month of Elul, and in the month of Elul, we return with sincerity to Hashem from the depths of our heart, and especially during the days of Slichus. So then Hashem, which will be the store owner, says, okay, I already see you're making an effort, so I'm already going to extend credit, even though you haven't yet paid up. So even though the year didn't go the way, let's say, it was supposed to, but I see you're already making a goodwill effort to do it. This is a mashal that the Rebbe Rashab gives. And And the illustration is, if you have a merchant who sells on credit on a large scale, at the end of the year, he urges his customers to make an accounting, how much money they still owe, how much was sold, how much they need to pay still, and he tells them how much they need to pay. So although he does not yet have money in the bank, but the merchant is very happy that it sold so much during the year. And he sold it for a good price, and I have a lot of money. So he's expecting the money. Still he demands from the purchasers to pay what they owe him. And he reminds them, if in the future, you still, in the coming year, you want to continue to buy on credit, it depends how quickly you pay up your debt from the past. And he gives a limit, he gives a time of 3 weeks. So during these 3 weeks, the merchant could be happy and he's cheerful because he's encouraging everyone to pay up, and he's expecting that he's going to be paid up. And so when the customers see that the merchant is happy, they also will pay up. However, now once the 3 weeks are over, the merchant makes a final counting of everything he is owed. And when he sees all the effort which the buyers are putting in, and the toil, they're putting in tremendous efforts, hatsuma, to pay up their debts, and he realizes they sincerely want to pay, but they're poor, and they cannot afford. So then he is kind to them, and he says, whatever you still owe me, don't worry about it. And he says, I forgive you for whatever you didn't yet pay up, and when it comes a certain time, then you can already start buying again on credit once again. What's his name, Shul? Vaeim Yemei Slichus. This is like the Slichus period. During the month of Elul is when one does teshuvah and returns to Hashem, from the depths of their heart. So even if one didn't yet do complete teshuvah in the month of Elul for everything that happened in the past year, however, as long as you take upon yourself a resolution that you're going to next year pay on time, so then that's enough for me. I see you trying to pay in the past. I see so guarantee me in the future you'll do it. You'll pay up, and then I'll start giving you on credit again. That time period is when we assure Hashem that we're going to be good in the future, called Kabbalah Teva Alabad, taking achlatas, taking resolutions. So for the future, that is the time of slichas. And his tshuva is accepted as a resolve for the future. According to the tshuva of the month of Elul and in the days of slichas, the Kabbalah's Ol Malchusa Yizbarech Rosh Hashanah, and how we accept Hashem's yoke on Rosh Hashanah. And according to that, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Hashem will give him blessings and decide and determine the amount that he will receive throughout the year for children and health and prosperity. So the days of Elul, and especially the end of Elul, and now we're in the month of Elul, is days of doing teshuvah and showing Hashem. We might not fix everything from the past year, but we're at least trying to, and that Hashem, that itself, Hashem will accept